Summer temperatures can be really high in the city, and residents have different ways to cool down. One way is to find a restaurant serving the famous ice-cold noodle dish, naengmyeon. I'm having lunch with a fellow noodle fanatic, Jonathan, one of the partners in Korean-Mexican restaurant Vatos Tacos, who scours the capital for the best and most traditional naengmyeon.
네, 감사합니다.
Wow, there are little icebergs in my
Wow.
noodles.
Right?
Ice cold noodles.
Right. Naeng meaning cold, myeon meaning noodles. Usually when Westerners think of noodles, it's usually in hot broth, right? Yeah. You gotta taste the broth first.
Okay.
Yeah. This is, I guess, like how the purists do it, right?
I mean, how do you rate this?
I go for, usually 100% beef broth. But the thing that's unique about this restaurant is they have a 60%, 40% mix of dongchimi and beef broth. Dongchimi is actually what you see right here. And it's basically fermented radish juice. In this restaurant, they use about 80% radish, and then they put in onions, apple, they put pear to add a little flavoring, and then they ferment it for a couple of days.
And what about these noodles?
Well, so these noodles, it's made out of buckwheat and also sweet potato or goguma.
Okay.
It adds a little bit of, I think, stretchiness.
Gives it that bite?
Yeah, and also another thing is they only boil these noodles for less than a minute.
Okay.
And then they actually rinse it in cold water.
That's right, you give it a little
Yeah,
massage.
you give it a little massage
I
and a
remember
rinse.
my mom doing
2
that.
times.
Yeah.
And my grandma always says the secret to making the noodles 쫄깃쫄깃, which is that
Stringy.
stretchy kind of a bite, is the way you rinse it after you boil it. So that's the secret.
I know that you said your grandfather was from North Korea, and you used to eat these all the time, and...
Naengmyeon was his favorite food.
Was it?
And in North Korea, they actually ate this in the middle of winter. And so Koreans have this, I guess, what Westerners might think a little bit quirky tradition. And they follow this philosophy of 이열치열, which means fight heat with heat. So in the middle of summer, we eat, the hot chicken broth soup, right?
삼계탕.
Samgyetang, exactly. I think in North Korea, they were fighting cold with cold. But I just choose to eat naengmyeon when it's hot.
But first, my recipe for naengmyeon.
Naengmyeon, or cold noodles, are my dad's absolute favorite thing to eat. And that's mainly because of these. These are buckwheat and sweet potato noodles, and they have a really unique texture. And this is what makes this dish so particularly special. They don't take long at all, and then they're gonna start on an ice-cold journey. And that journey begins with some beef stock. Heat that up just slightly and dissolve a little bit of sugar inside. That might sound strange, but this whole dish is about balance. There's savoriness, there's sweetness. With that, some salt, a hint of tang in the form of vinegar. And it's really important. This is what gives this soup such a refreshing feel to it. And that tang is going to really lift this dish into something that's quite special for the summer. This may seem a little bit unusual, cold noodles, who eats that? But in the same vein as the gazpacho, it's just a refreshing way to enjoy noodles. And Korea does have quite hot summers. Place this into the freezer so it gets nice and cold. These noodles take no time to cook. And immediately, I'm gonna plunge them into cold water. Give them a quick rinse to stop that cooking process. And then my mom used to give them a bit of a massage. Don't know the reason behind her madness, but it is a method that I'm gonna copy. And you can tell just by squeezing them at this point, they have a really unusual texture. They're springy, stretchy. So satisfying to eat. It's almost like tasting a crusty baguette. Once you have one bite, you can't stop eating till you eat the whole thing. You should always cut them before you serve them so that people aren't struggling to eat them. I like to make a special topping on top of these noodles that really brings out the refreshing crispness to it. And I start out with some red onions. I've soaked these for a little while in some ice water just to take away that harsh bite. I'm gonna add some Korean cucumbers, my special julienne peeler, I like the skins. They add great color to the final dish. Toss those together to get your cucumber ribbons. I love this thing, it's so easy. And then Asian pears. They look like apples, but inside they're really crispy and have a watery texture, just like a pear. So sweet. If you can't find these Asian pears, you can use other hard pears, like a conference pear. Season them gently. It's a bit of sugar, vinegar, salt, mustard. You can use Korean mustard or just plain English mustard. Give it a nice warming heat at the end. And just give it a good mix with your hands. The rest of my topping is going to come in the form of leftover beef. I'm going to throw that on top of my very cold beef stock. Ice cold beef broth. A little bit of our mustardy, vinegary salad topping. A few slices of your leftover beef. Boiled egg. A little bit of seaweed strips. Some umami going right on top. Sesame seeds. And remember with noodles, the tastier they are, the louder you are. Eating ice-cold noodles may seem a little strange, but I assure you, after having a bite of all these textures and flavors, you're gonna crave this summer after summer as soon as the heat hits.